Todd is not only a remarkable, successful 30-year titan in business with having multiple businesses that generate multiplied millions of dollars.
And if that plan happens to be to build $1 million company, which I can help you do.
But he's humble. He's a man of God. He's a family man.
The world's news organizations are built on everything but positivity.
He is an influential entrepreneur and business figure for over 30 years.
I've got to forecast. I've got to pronounce. I've got to project. I've got to share with you my ideas, my vision, my goals for not only myself, but for you.
That's why he's came up with his incredible concept of taking and creating a platform for people that are wired differently.
And you got to understand that your habits of your person and your habits of your business and your habits of your spirituality have to lead to the North Star of who you are. We need to figure out who we want to be in life. Good morning, everybody. It's on like Donkey Kong. It's Thursday. We're going to let it rip, potato chip. What do I got here? What is this thing? What is this thing on my chest? Is it a figment of my imagination? No, good morning, everybody. Listen, it's Thursday. It's the day before Friday, and we're gonna let it all go today. Listen, today we're gonna talk about the Beattitudes of business. We've been kind of flirting with the Beattitudes this entire week, and yesterday was kind of was wonky. Remember, we talked about things being wonky. We were wonky. We got a bad start. We were 15 minutes late. We couldn't get technology to work. And I got to tell you, that show really turned out really well yesterday. Lots of comments, lots of views. And I think it was basically the fact that I was humbled. It's one of those things, that we just kind of have to talk about as leaders. We have to talk about as being wired differently. We have to talk about our own egos. We have to talk about arrogance. We have to talk about being too complacent. We have to talk about, being too shy. We have to be, it's just this whole balance, right? This ego empathy balance thing that we're constantly kind of challenged within our life. And I think that the ego empathy balance is something I wrote about in my second book. And I think it's something that we need to really kind of talk about today as we go into the Beattitudes of business. The Beatitudes of business are basically the Beatitudes that Jesus spoke on the Sermon of the Mount. I mean, these were 8 Beatitudes, 8 attitudes of how we're to be on this world. And one of the interesting things about the Beatitudes is in my studies, in my even more brief studies, is that, Jesus spoke these Beatitudes to basically shake the world. Shake the world. Like make what? I thought it was one way, but you're telling me it's another way. Jesus took the mount and gave a sermon, and he shook the world. Not like just once, but not like just twice, but he continued to shake the world. And when he looked at all these people, many, he spoke to many, in multitudes, it says in the Bible. He spoke to multitudes. I don't know what multitudes is, but I'm guessing it's a lot of people. And when he spoke to all the multitudes, he knew he was going to shake the world. Why do I say stuff like that? Why do I act that way? Because I want you to remember. I want something to stick in your mind. I want something to be just a little bit different about me, a little bit different about the teaching, a little bit different about you. I want you to be shaking the world. Jesus did that. We have to shake the world. And the interesting thing is when he took the Sermon of the Mount, people, I'm thinking people were expecting to shake the world, like shake the world, man. Like, tell them how it is, Jesus. Tell them how we're going to take the world. Tell them how we're going to expand. Tell them how we're going to dominate the world. And it's Jesus. He is something else, man. Wait till you hear him speak. Wait till the warm-up band's done, and wait till the pre-speakers are done, and wait till Jesus takes the stage and he takes the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, we've walked for days to hear this. We've walked overnight and in over morning. We literally have no shoes. We barely have leather sandals, but we've come from far distance away to in multitudes to hear this Jesus guy speak and shake the world. But I think to the amazement of the multitudes, they were surprised with what Jesus was going to say. They were surprised with what shaking the world maybe meant in their minds or what they heard. I mean, they didn't have digital and social media, of course, and they didn't have billboard. I don't even know how they listen. I'm challenged as you is figuring out how they even knew how to get there and knew what time it started. Or I mean, think about it. They didn't have any press releases. They didn't have any. So how did they know? I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but I just think God drove the people there and they, by word, made it around, and Jesus is going to shake the world. We got to find out more about this Jesus guy. He's making a big impact on the world. Can't wait to hear him speak. But here's the thing I want to share with you about this morning, about when Jesus did the Sermon on the Mount. He didn't walk up there to a big fanfare, and he didn't, I'm sure I don't even know if they clapped. I'm like, hey, Jesus is here. And I guarantee you he didn't have the intro video, the walk-up video I have, where I'm like, Todd is a impressionary figure, and he's built this platform to uniquely gather wired differently people, and he's been 30-year business and permanent. Listen, look at all the stuff he's done. He's Todd Saylor, blah 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 blah. Hey, Todd Saylor. I mean, Jesus, like Jesus didn't do any of that. I wasn't there. I don't know. But I guarantee you there was no Jumbotron, there was no background music, and they weren't like throwing things on the stage and carrying on like the Village Idiots. They're like, oh man, here he is. He's going to shake the world. He's going to tell us how it is. He's going to tell us these principles of this world, and then he's going to shake the world. Well, here's what the Beatitudes end up being. The Beatitudes, and I'm calling it Beatitudes of business because I want to grow you personally, I want to grow you spiritually, and I want to grow you profitably. I know you're like, Todd, you say that every morning. Well, it's true. I mean, you need to know what I'm about. You need to know what I'm called to do. You need to know what I want to do with you, for you, about you, through you. I want to shake the world with you. And Jesus is doing this, and he takes the Sermon on the Mount, and to everyone's surprise, he just like flips the script. He's like, whoop. I'm going to tell you, he says, I'm going to tell you these 8 Beatitudes, and this is how you're to be. Okay, Jesus, tell us how to be. So before I set up the Beatitudes, I mean, we're going to talk about all of them. We're going to mention them today, and I've got like this cool thing, 10 strategies to cultivate meekness, because meekness is the beatitude we're going to focus on today. But I want you to understand that these beatitudes that grow us personally, that God is speaking to us spiritually, are the things that need to exude out of us for our profitability or our business side of us, right? We aren't going to become profitable in business. We aren't going to be fruitful in life if we don't have these beatitudes, and we're not talking about how to do those. So I want to cultivate these strategies to be, this one is 10 strategies to become meek, more meek. And you look at a guy like me and you say, Todd, I thought you said I'm supposed to be meek, and you're not meek. I struggled with that. We struggled yesterday. And I guess I'm not meek in the world's eyes, and I need to work on becoming more meek. So I have got 10 strategies to cultivate meekness today for myself. Let's just work on Todd, because he's got this ego. His ego empathy balance is truth. We don't know where he's at sometimes. But listen, my heart is there for you. And I want you to understand, I want this to be about you. I want you to understand that if I can make it about me and my weaknesses and my meeknesses, I can help you understand your weaknesses and your meeknesses. And meekness isn't a weakness. So I want to set it up with a story about Tony Dungy, and he's one of the best examples. I've got two examples of what a meek person or a meek image should look like. Two examples. And the first example I want you to see is a horse, a bridled horse. I've got the horse in the top right-hand corner here. I want you to understand. One of the images I want you to understand when I talk to you about meekness, Jesus talks about the meekness. He says, blessed are the meek, they will possess land. He says, lots of land, lots of, I guess, riches in that regard, and wealth. Land is wealth, right? They shall inherit the earth and possess land is what meekness, he says in the Beattitudes. And so one of the things I was researching on meekness, what does meekness look like? And so I want to kind of set it up with you right now. Meekness looks like a bridled, powerful, beautiful horse. No question. That's what meekness looks like. See, I got to see if I can. I thought I had a bigger image for you. So there we go. So what I want to talk to you about though is this Tony Dungy story. And I want to kind of set this up for the meekness strategy today. And we're going to talk about how we can cultivate more meekness in our life. But Tony Dungy is one of the greatest football coaches ever walked the planet, if not the greatest football coach, because he has won Super Bowls. He's played in the NFL. He's been an elite player in college. And more importantly, he is an ambassador for Jesus Christ. He is a leader in the kingdom building, entrepreneurial, inspiring mindset. Even he is wired differently. I spent as many as 3 days with him last February at the Super Bowl. And he's on the cover of my screenshot, him and I out there speaking. And I got to just tell you how I met him, because I want to set this story up on like Tony Dungy and this bridled horse are the images that I really like for you to understand as what meekness looks like, right? Meekness. I wish I loaded this in the wrong darn category. Meekness. Let me read to you meekness. Meekness. I have it right here. Meekness. Meekness is the means by which God trains the sinful soul by taming the temper, subduing the assertive self, calming the passions, managing the impulses of the heart, and bringing order out of chaos in the soul. Think about that. That is so super cool. Meekness is like taming of the wild horse. Man is by nature a wild creature with a short temper, impatient and self-opinionated. All right, I get that. Without meekness, we slide into an eternal conflict of the soul that manifests itself into anger, frustration, bitterness, resentment, and turmoil. Meekness tames the temper, subdues the self, calms the passions, and brings order out of the chaos in the soul. Meekness calms, soothes, and subdues. So I'm going to read that again, because it's like everything that I want you to understand about what today is, what we're talking about today. Without meekness, we slide into an internal conflict of the soul. Without meekness, we slide into an internal conflict of the soul that manifests itself into anger, frustration, bitterness, resentment, and turmoil. Meekness tames the temper, subdues the self, calms the passion, and brings order out of chaos in the soul. Meekness calms, soothes, and subdues. I need you to understand. And so when I was out there at Phoenix going to the Super Bowl, and I spoke at the Super Bowl about the movie we're creating about my father and the tiger in us, and a lot of you have seen that video, and maybe we can show that again sometime. But I remember going to the airport, and a good friend of mine by the name of Darren Gray, he said, "Jump in my car. We're gonna go pick up somebody special. I want to show you some things." And he surprised me by picking up Tony Dungy. And so one of the things that I didn't know until I got there with it is that Tony Dungy was coming. And I had no idea. I've never met Tony Dungy in the person, but my father holds him of high regard. I hold him of high regard. And when I think about meekness, meekness is not a weakness. I want you to think about that horse, that bridled horse, and what we were just reading there. And I want you to picture an image of a human being. And the best image I can give you right now is Tony Dungy. And so Tony Dungy is now a sports commentator. He is an emancipator for Jesus across the world. He's got countless non-for-profits. He is just an amazing image of not what meekness only is, but what God wants of us. And so when I remember I going to the airport, and Darren and I jumped out of this black car because the airport was chaos. And what I was thinking about is like, how would I see Tony Dungy? What would he come in with, an entourage of people? Would he have handlers? Would he have all these people around him? I mean, look, would he have bodyguards? I mean, he's recognized to over 80% of Americans and like 50% of the world. I mean, this guy is one of the most recognizable figures on the planet. And I'm going to meet him, right? And I'm thinking about this leader, this NFL football coach, right? And I know a little bit about him. It's Quiet Strength. His book is amazing. But at the end of the day, you still, until you meet somebody, you don't know something about him. You can't tell him. You can read all my books and you can get a good idea. You can follow my shows and you can get a good idea. And when you really meet me, or you meet somebody, you really form that bonding opinion, like, okay, he's really, really what I saw, or he isn't what I saw. So all I've ever known, Tony Dungy spoke to me when I was a little kid, like 12 years old, at a football camp, and I thought it was pretty cool back then. He wasn't famous. I seen him on TV. I see him talking. I see his interviews. But until you meet somebody and you really get involved with them, you really don't have any spidey senses of what's going to happen. So what I'm thinking about is one of the most famous, recognizable men on the planet is he's got to have an entourage. He's got to have bodyguards. He's an emancipator for Jesus. He's got to have, people hating on him. He's politically outspoken. He's got to have people hating on him. It's a powerful, powerful man. And so here's what I want you to understand is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. And so I'm waiting at the airport. I'm at the luggage bag, waiting down at the bottom, and there's an escalator that comes down and feeds right into this luggage area. And Darren's kind of got his eyes out looking for him. I got my eyes out looking for him. We just know he's coming. And I'm looking for trumpets, man. I'm looking for music. There's got to be a warning, right? So as I'm sitting by the luggage claim, I'm having some small talk with some people, and Darren says, there he is. And I look over there, and I look at the top of the escalator for banners and bodyguards and music and reporters, and I'm just ready. And to my surprise, I saw the image of meekness. I saw the image of what God has said to us to be meek. The meek shall inherit the earth. They will possess land. God has called us to be meek. He's called us to be, one, poor in the spirit. We talked about the beggar on the corner. And two, we are his blessed are those who mourn or repent and feel bad about their sin, right? Because then they are comforted. And number three, today we're talking about blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. They will possess much land. And here comes Tony Dungy at the top of the escalator. I mean, a lot of us saw that image of Trump coming down the escalator, and I don't know where it was. But we saw an image of Trump coming down the escalator, and you thought, man, that guy, oh, man, he's powerful. Look at his wife. Look at his power. Look at his suit. Look at the bodyguards in front of him, the bodyguards in back of him. Look at the image of all this power. Trump. But this escalator was different. This escalator was meek. Tony Dungy was coming down the elevator, the escalator. Tony Dungy was coming down this escalator. Not like Trump. No trumpets, no music, no bodyguards, nothing. And he was pushing a wheelchair. And in this wheelchair was one of his 12 or so adopted children. And this particular child was 30 years old. This particular child had a bone disease, a deficiency. And next to the wheelchair was another son that he adopted. Carrying 2 bags. One bag on each shoulder and a bag on the wheelchair. And Tony had a bag pushing a wheelchair. And as he came down the escalator, I couldn't but think of the disparity or the differential of Trump coming down an escalator and this amazingly Christian-led, filled, meek man, right? Tony Dungy. And I want that image for you. I think the bridled horse, right? The controlled strength, the controlled wisdom, right? The calmed soul, right? But I want you to see Tony Dungy for a moment. I wanted you to see a human being that God has architected and created to give me the image, to give to you the image of what meekness is. Tony has 12 or 13 children. I think 10 of them are adopted. Tony hardly said 5 words until we got into the black car and got him out of there. People followed him all the way down that escalator. They followed him all the way to me, and he was pushing his handicapped son, and his other son was with him who plays football in Florida near us, and they were just amazing people. And as he pushed the chair, he wouldn't let anybody touch that chair. Nobody. And he kept his eye on his other son who had the bags. And it was just this trail of meekness coming to me, and an entourage of people hoping to get his autograph or to say hello to him or touch him or whatever they wanted to do. And as he got to me, I said, "Hello, Mr. Dungy. My name is Todd Saylor. I'm with Darren Gray." He says, "Hello, nice to meet you." And he said, "One moment, please." And then he started to sign autographs and say hi to a few people. And even when he signed autographs, I got to tell you, it was amazing because it wasn't gregarious and he wasn't over like hugging and all that kind of stuff. He was just, "I got business to do. I don't feel worthy of signing this stuff." And he would sign it and he would hand it. He would sign it and he would hand it. He would sign it and he would smile and he would hand it. And he would sign. You could see that the meekness in this man, you could not fake, you could not hide. It was just exuding out of him. So I want you to have that image. I want you to understand this is what we're talking about today, meekness. And the best thing I could do to you today is to give you an example of what meekness looks like. This bridled horse. Look it up. bridled horses, the powered of strength, strength under control. That is meekness. This is what I want you to have. Meekness, the meek shall inherit the earth. So number one, the Beattitudes of business. Let's just kind of break this down. We got 6 minutes to go today. And my lesson, we're going to have to probably punt right till tomorrow, Friday. But we're going to talk about this today because number one, the Beatitudes of businesses. Jesus gave us these Beatitudes of life. And he said, Todd, I think you should probably talk about it and explain how it works in business. Well, number one, the blessed are those who are poor in the spirit. And we talked about being humble and understanding that we can only be poor in the spirit if we're willing to take everything God gives us and let him know and understand that we are poor in ourselves, and all we can do is let him pour into us, right? The humble beggar has a cup on the side of a curb, and he's realizing he is nothing without somebody giving him money to exist. Well, we're nothing without God pouring into us our food, right? We need to be humble, poor in the spirit. We need to be humble in him. And in our business, we need to know that all the fruits and all the profits that come to our company are through our own humility and through our own poorness in the spirit. And that's how we should look at our employees and how we're to do things in life, in our businesses. We need to be humble in that regard. We need to be poor in the spirit and realize that only God can fill our cup up of profits. Number two, blessed are those who mourn. They are comforted, right? For those who mourn will be comforted. Well, those that mourn are basically saying, I feel bad about sinning. I feel bad about letting you down, Jesus. I feel bad about being 15 minutes late on the show yesterday, right? I mourn that sin so that then I can be comforted, because then he says, I get you, Todd. I'm there for you. Number three today is blessed are the meek who will possess land. Blessed are the meek who will inherit the earth. So here we are on Beatitudes for business, and I'm telling you about the meek. As a leadership component, I need you to be meek. And we started off with saying, Todd, are you meek? And I said, I'm meek, but I need to work on being more meek. I never really thought about it until I got into this. And as a leader, I want you to understand that you need to become meek. You need to work on your meekness. Now, listen, humility that we're talking about with the poor in the spirit, humility is how we are for ourselves and how we look at other people. But meekness, on the other hand, you say, Todd, well, what's the difference between humility and meekness? I'm here to tell you that humility is how we feel about ourselves, but meekness is how we treat other people. Right? Tony's meekness allows him to treat other people with quiet strength. Tony's meekness allows him to be this bridled, strong horse, giving servanthood to the master, right? And to the people and the riders and the people around him. Meekness is that attitudinal disorder that we must learn how to control, or we will not possess land. We will not inherit the kingdom of the land. We will not have those things that he's talking about. Blessed are the meek. And so what I wanted to do for you today was I wanted to say, okay, how can we become more meek? Todd, how can you become more meek? Courtney, how can you become more meek? How can that happen, Terry? How can that happen? Hello, everybody. God bless you, man. I just love the fact so many viewers. So here's the thing. I have 10 strategies to cultivate meekness. And I just want to run through these. And I think maybe we should just do this tomorrow. But I want you to understand, number one, Terry, if you got your fingers working out there, why don't you write these down for me so we can work on these as individuals, okay? Number one, moderate our expectations of others. Moderate our 10 things to help Todd Saylor in his ego dissipate. 10 things for us to look at as human beings, not our own humility, but how can we become meek and be ourselves in meekness, not weakness, into others. So one, I want you to help you dial that in, is to moderate your expectations of others. I'm so damn guilty. Heather and I talk about this all the time. We expect people to work like us. We expect people to be like us in business, and they're just not. In our meekness, we need to understand the expectations of others so we can work with them, so we can understand ourselves, so we can get the best out of them, the best out for everybody. Number 2, find joy. Let's see if Terry, you're still out there. I think you're going to write some of these down for us. Number 1, moderate expectations of others. Find joy and evidence of God's grace in our life. You know, a lot of us call that gratitude. Find joy and evidence of God's grace. We need to be looking about what God's grace is for us. Number 3, remember how much you've been forgiven. I think of Tony. I think he's doing these things. I think I need to model myself after that mindset. Remember how much you've been forgiven. I've been forgiven in multitudes by my family, my employees, my partners, by God. Meekness. Take time before you form judgment. Oh, Todd. Oh, man. I see my daughter Courtney's on this show, and whoo, man, I'm feeling convicted. Take time before you form judgment. You got this, my friends. Take the time before you form judgment. Number 5, make friends with meek people. Think about 2 people right now, just 2, even just 1. I got Tony Dungy out there, so you think about 1 more person out there that's meek. I'm looking at some of the followers this morning. Thank you for everybody. And I look at Debbie. Debbie Cromwell is meek. She's one of my students. Thanks for teaching me meekness, Debbie. I make friends with Debbie. Steve Hagan, he's meek. He's a student of mine. He's meek. Stefan, he's meek. These are great people. These are my students. I'm looking at and I'm learning from them. They're very meek people. They balance humility and meekness, and we work on that through what we're doing. We need to understand those things. Make friends with meek people. Number 6, take pleasure in the joy of others. Man, I do. Can you take pleasure in the joy of others? Sometimes it's hard for me, especially when I'm competing against them. Take pleasures in the joy of others. Right? Take pleasures in the joy of others. Number 7, discern God's hand in the work of your enemies. Like, okay, so this one I got to start by discern God's hand in the work of your enemies. So listen, God's always working for us. And we have enemies, and sometimes our enemies are believers, right? And we got to understand that we're both believers, and they are kind of our competition or enemies. And I think we're called to discern what's going on in our enemy's mindset. And God's saying it, and we're talking about that's how we become meek, part of our curriculum to become more meek. Number 8, work daily in fellowship with Jesus. Do your devotionals. And fellowship means to really get intimate, like have a conversation, ask him a question, and then go Google it in the Bible, and it'll answer you, man. God can talk to you personally simply by saying, I got a question. Type it in the Google it or whatever you got to do to it. What does the Bible, Jesus, what are you saying? And it pops up and it'll tell you exactly what the Bible says about your question. I do that every morning. 9, anticipate all that God has promised. He's promised us the world. He's promised us, blessed are the meek that will inherit the earth, the world, right? And so one of his promises is that right now. Anticipate that is coming for you. Meek people need to know this and anticipate it. Number 10, ask God to give you meekness. Literally flat out, ask God to give you meekness. Just ask him. When's the last time you asked God to become humble? When is the last time you've asked God to be meek? When is the last time you asked God for any of these things? I think that we should be challenged in this regard. I want to challenge you this morning. The Beattitudes of business. We got 8 Beattitudes, and we're going to go over them. We're going to take as long as we need to take on them, because I think it's so important. I think the Beatitudes, and here they all are. We got, blessed are those who are poor in the spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are meek. Blessed are those who are hungry for the justice. Blessed are those who are merciful. Blessed are those who are clean at heart. And blessed are those who are peacemakers. And 8, blessed are those that suffer persecution for justice. And those are the Beatitudes of business as well. I don't think God just said, hey, let's Todd drop these on them just from a spiritual perspective and cross over to the personal side, but you don't need to take it into your business world. Well, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. All right. Tony Dungy is an amazing example of the meek. A bridled horse is an amazing example of the meek. Meekness is the means by which God trains the sinful soul by taming the temper, subduing the assertive self, calming the passions, managing the impulses of the heart, and bringing order out of chaos in the soul. Bringing order out of the chaos in the soul. So this morning, I want you to understand, I want you to dig down a little deeper. I want you to look at your soul. I want you to think about your soul. I want you to dig down to the point of, like, where is the chaos in your soul and how can we fix that? I just gave you 10 examples on how to fix the chaos of our soul. We need to become more meek. I know you can do it. So your homework this morning is, I want to become more meek. I want the Beatitudes of Jesus and his fanfare. I want to be in that crowd, and I want to listen to what he's saying. I want to shock the world. But interesting enough, Jesus basically doesn't give us a rah-rah speech or tell us how we need to be powerful and dominant and take over the world. He says the opposite. He says you're to be poor in the spirit. You're supposed to mourn. You're to be meek, to be merciful, clean at heart, peacemakers, suffer persecution. I mean, this is not anything that shocks the world. This is counterculture to the world. I need you to be counterculture to the world. I need you to be meek. Thanks, you guys. Have a great day. Tomorrow's Friday. We're going to celebrate it. We're going to have a great time. I got a big announcement I'm going to make tomorrow on the show on how we're going to start doing things in the future. Have a great day. I love you. I love you. I love you.